After starting this video, you might be asking yourself why Henry Cavill would still take on the role of Captain Britain after his recent gig as Cavalrine. Well, we've got all the details on the Captain Britain movie and how his characters might fit into the MCU. Plus, there's one crucial MCU team that could connect the dots in Marvel's multiverse saga. So, let's dive in with maximum effect and uncover all the facts. Let's kick things off with a quick introduction to who Captain Britain is. Brian Braddock, also known as Captain Britain, is a superhero who first appeared in 1976, created by writer Chris Claremont and artist Herb Trimpe. With later contributions from legends like Alan Moore and Alan Davis, Brian made his debut in Captain Britain Weekly #1. He's the original character to hold the Captain Britain title, which he later evolved into Captain Avalon. As Captain Britain, Brian was granted powers by the legendary magician Merlyn and his daughter Roma, tasked with being the protector of the British Isles and its people. He also served as the defender of Earth 616 as part of the multiversal Captain Britain Corps. After a dark turn where he was corrupted by Morgan le Fay, Brian's twin sister Betsy took over the Captain Britain mantle, while Brian became Captain Avalon, the protector of Avalon. Now, you might be thinking, isn't Captain Britain just a clone of Captain America? Well, he's definitely not just a Captain America copy. Sure, the name might suggest he's a UK version of the Star-Spangled Avenger, but Captain Britain's origin and powers make him a unique character in the Marvel Universe. While Captain America represents the New World ideals of an underdog rising through technology and determination, Brian Braddock's powers come from a much older source, magic. After a near-fatal motorcycle crash caused by a supervillain's attack on a nuclear facility, Brian is granted his powers by the wizard Merlyn and his daughter Roma. His abilities are steeped in the myth and magic of British history, making him more of a mystical protector than a military super soldier. And here's another twist. Captain Britain's powers aren't static. They change a lot depending on who's writing him and what the story demands. While he has the usual superhuman strength, speed, and agility, he can also fly, shoot energy beams, and create force fields. In his most recent version, his powers are actually tied to his self-confidence and the mood of the British nation. When the country is feeling patriotic, Captain Britain is at his strongest. When he doubts himself, his powers weaken. So, while he might share some similarities with Captain America, Captain Britain is very much his own character with a unique blend of magic, myth, and national pride. Now, let's dive into how we got a tease for Brian Braddock in Avengers Endgame. Remember the scene where Steve Rogers and Tony Stark travel back to S.H.I.E.L.'s Camp Lehigh base in 1970? While Steve is sneaking around, he catches a glimpse of Peggy Carter, and if you listen closely, you can hear Peggy say, "Braddock hasn't checked in recently." That little line was a subtle hint at Brian Braddock's possible presence in the MCU. In the comics, Brian Braddock becomes Captain Britain after surviving a serious motorcycle crash. But there's another layer to consider. Peggy might have been referring to Braddock's father, Sir James Braddock, one of the founding members of the Captain Britain Corps. Even if that's the case, it still hints at Brian Braddock's potential future as Captain Britain in the MCU. We got another taste of this possibility in Phase 4's What If, where Peggy Carter takes the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers, becoming Captain Carter. She even made an appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. However, despite her British roots, Peggy wasn't called Captain Britain, which leaves the door wide open for the real Captain Britain to make his debut in the MCU's multiverse saga. And with the groundwork laid in Avengers Endgame, it feels like just a matter of time before we see him in action. We've already seen the multiverse shake things up in Phase 5, with Loki introducing various Loki variants, No Way Home bringing back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, and Multiverse of Madness showcasing the Earth 838 Illuminati, composed of variants from another reality. These multiversal teams are expected to play a significant role in the MCU's future, with rumors swirling about groups like the Council of Reeds stepping into the spotlight. Interestingly, we're not just talking about heroes here. With the introduction of the Doom Corps in Avengers Doomsday, we've learned that RDJ will return as Doctor Doom, a move that's bound to get fans buzzing. And adding to the mix, Indian actor Dhanush, whom you might remember from The Gray Man, is set to play a variant of Doom in Doomsday. So as we talked about earlier, The Captain Britain Corps is a big deal in the Marvel multiverse. While Brian Braddock first became Captain Britain back in 1976 as Captain Britain No. 1, the Corps itself didn't show up until 1984's The Mighty World of Marvel No. 13. This team was created by Merlyn, his daughter Roma, and Sir James Braddock, and includes various Captain Britain versions from different realities, each representing the British Isles of their world. These captains get their powers from exotic particles that appear at dimensionally weak spots, like the British Isles in each reality. The Corps comes together to protect the multiverse and manage the gateways between dimensions, making them one of Marvel's top multiverse teams. In the main 616 universe, 3 heroes have held the Captain Britain title: Brian Braddock, his twin sister Betsy, and Kelsey Lee Kirkland, all gaining powers from the same matrix. Although they're not exactly variants of each other, they'd be a perfect fit for the MCU's multiverse saga. Given their role in safeguarding the multiverse, introducing the Captain Britain Corps now makes total sense. There's even buzz about Henry Cavill, who played Superman, potentially stepping into the role of Brian Braddock after leaving the DC Universe. While this isn't confirmed yet, it's an exciting idea that could bring a fan-favorite actor into Marvel's universe. So, keep an eye out. The Captain Britain Corps might be just what the MCU needs to tie together its expanding multiverse saga. There are quite a few spots in Marvel Studios' Phases 5 and 6 where the Captain Britain Corps could make their debut. For instance, Avengers Secret Wars, which is shaping up to be a huge showdown with tons of heroes taking on Doctor Doom, could be the perfect place for Captain Britain to make an appearance. There's also a chance they might get their own project in one of the open slots for Phase 6, giving them a big intro with a solo movie. Now, some of you might be wondering why Henry Cavill would still be in the running to play Captain Britain after taking on the role of Cavill. Well, there's a bit of backstory here. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Cavill mentioned that he wouldn't want to take on an MCU role that someone else has already played. But he did admit that he's seen the fan casts of himself as Captain Britain and said he'd find it loads of fun to play the character. He even drew a comparison to how Marvel modernized Captain America with Chris Evans, saying he'd love to bring a fresh, modern take to Captain Britain while still keeping the character's British essence. So if Cavill does end up playing Captain Britain, it would be his own new spin on the character, much like how Marvel revamped Captain America. Also, we've already seen actors play multiple roles in the MCU, especially if they're well known. Take Chris Evans, for example. He was Johnny Storm in the old Fantastic Four movies and then became Captain America in the MCU. He even came back as the Human Torch in Deadpool and Wolverine, though that was more of a fun nod to his earlier role. Another big example is RDJ, who died as Iron Man but is now returning as Doctor Doom. So Cavill playing different roles in the MCU is totally possible. Marvel is all about fan service these days, and Cavill is a perfect example of that. The MCU seems open to bringing in familiar faces for new and exciting roles. And that's a wrap for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget, we love hearing your suggestions for future videos, so drop them in the comments below.